Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game that was played, I believe, 2 years ago in 2020. It was an online match between Vassily, Ivanchuk and Alireza. Firouzja, even though I've written Alireta, so sorry about that. Let me just quickly fix that. Between Vassily and Alireza. And well, in this Sunday, the seventh leg of the Meltwater Champions Chester will start. It's the Julius Bear Challenge, and it will feature some very strong players, very interesting players. Amongst them, Vassal and Alireza. Here are all of the players if you guys are interested. So Magnus Duda, Kwang Liem, Pragananda, Aronyan, Giri, Rigaisi, Kaimer, Navara, Wojtaszek, Ivanchuk, Šarić, Gelfand, Niemann, and Christopher Yu. And also the winner of the MPL Indian Tour Leg 3 was supposed to play, but Narayanan said that he already promised that he would play some league, so he will not be joining. So probably Aravind will take his place, or if he can't do it, probably someone else. I don't think it was announced just yet. But yeah, of course, everyone is waiting for the Carlsen versus Niemann clash. But until that happens, we will have some very nice clashes between some of the legends like Ivanchuk and Gelfand. Will take on the youngsters Serigaisi, Kaimer, there's Pragananda, Christopher Yu, so it's going to be very interesting. And I thought I'd show you a game that was played between the two of them. They played a match. They played 10 rapid, or maybe there were 10 blitz games. I don't know. There were 10 rapid games, I think, online. And in the end, the result was 5-5. And then they played one more game. It was a blitz game, sort of a tiebreaker, and this is that game. So let's check it out. It's super funny as Vassal sacrifices 2 rooks for no apparent reason. Now let's dive straight into it, as Chuck usually does. So here, Vassal opens with pawn to e4. We have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now bishop to b5. Vassal goes for the Rui Lopez. We have a6, Morphe's defense by Alireza, bishop to a4, and now pawn to d6. We have c3 and the bishop to d7, the modern Steinitz defense. We have d4, g6, and now bishop to g5. So all been played before, nothing new. Even in 2020, we have f6, bishop back to e3, and the bishop to g7. We have castles by Vassal, knight to h6, and now pawn to h3, taking away the g4 square from Alireza's pieces. We have castles, and now there is one game from 1989 between Patrick Wolf and Agata Kamsky where queen to b3 check was played. Kamsky was able to win that game, but here we have rook to e1, and it is now, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Alireza deals with this position. He starts with king to h8, and of course, why wouldn't you? You are expecting this bishop to assume this diagonal, so better to have the king on h8. So knight b to d2, and now queen to e8. We have bishop to b3, and now pawn to b6. We have d captures on e5, d captures, and now knight to c4. And okay, Vassal has some very impressive setup here. The knight's putting pressure, but as long as this f6 e5 setup stands, the knights will not be able to do anything against this e5 pawn. So he will probably move the knight, move the queen. He will double up rooks on the d file, and Alireza will try, of course, to withstand this. So here we have g5 and knight to h2, gaining more control over the g4 square. Rook to d8, aligning the rook with the queen, and now queen, of course, goes to e2 first. We have queen to g6, now putting pressure on the e4 pawn, and pawn to f3. Vassal just defends it. We have knight to f7, and now rook a to d1. We have bishop to c8, offering a trade of rooks, and now bishop to f2. Knight to e7 and knight to e3, and you can see that Vassily is starting to control more and more squares. He controls d5, he controls f5, the bishop is controlling this long diagonal. Of course, there's a tension on the d file. If black trades, white gets the rook on the d file, and vice versa. So here, knight to d6, and now rook to d2. Alireza doesn't want to trade, but that means that, of course, Vassal will take this opportunity to double up rooks on the d file. a5, we have rook e to d1, and now rook d back to e8. He does not want to contest the rooks on the d file, so he switches the rook to the e file, and now comes rook captures on d6. And this is the first vintage Vassal move. Here, for example, if this was a rapid or a classical game, you would play play something like g4, and you would say, okay, you have no moves. I control all of the squares here. Look at my rooks here, controlling this entire d file, the bishop slicing all the way here, the knight controlling d5, controlling f5. This knight can come to f1 to g3 and then to f5 to h5. There's really nothing for black to do here. But it's a blitz game, so Vassily plays rook captures on d6. We have c captures on d6, rook captures on d6. So he did sacrifice some material, but he won a pawn, and now he's going to win the other one too. So rook d8 and the rook captures on b6. So now he already has a passed c pawn. We have queen to e8 by Alireza. Now comes pawn to a4, making sort of a safe haven for the rook on b5. And here, bishop to d7. Now the queen and bishop are attacking the a4 pawn. And again, there's really, like any move Vassily makes is a good move. You can play a queen to c2 to defend the pawn. You can play knight to d5 if you want to play attractive moves, but Vassily plays rook to b5. So he gave up the first rook for some blitz counterplay, and now he gives up the other rook for some blitz counterplay, which is, well, only one of the reasons why we love Vassily so much. And here, Alireza could grab it right away, but he doesn't. He first plays rook to b8. He thinks it would be too dangerous to create a pass pawn. So c4, Vassily says, all right, you can take it any way you want. I will have my pass pawn, and I will play a captures on b5. That will create a pass b pawn and a pass c pawn that's already there. So knight to c6, and now knight to d5. We have pawn to f5 by Alireza. And e captures on f5, bishop captures on f5, and now bishop to c5, attacking Alireza's rook on f8. So here comes knight to d4, attacking the queen. If bishop captures, then of course you're very happy, your rook will no longer be attacked. Queen back to d1, and now knight captures on b5. This is how Alireza captures the second rook, and he keeps his bishop pair. So a captures on b5. Now Vassily has the two connected pass pawns, and pawn to e4. Alireza wants to break through and make use of those bishops and rooks. So bishop to d4, now countering the dark square bishop, queen d7, and here we have pawn to b6. We have bishop captures on d4, queen captures with check, and now Alireza blocks with the queen, not afraid of the two connected pass pawns. And Vassily says, all right, let's do it. Queen captures on g7. King captures on g7, and now knight to g4. And it seems like the two pawns should be unstoppable, but let's see what happens. E captures on f3, we have g captures on f3, and now bishop to e6. Vassily says, not a problem. I'm just going to play c5. The knight is now nicely defended, and my pawns are marching forward. So here, rook captures on f3. Luckily, it comes with an attack on the bishop. So first, we have to tend to the bishop, bishop to c4, and now bishop captures on d5. Very, very precisely played by Alireza. Bishop captures, and now rook to f5, not allowing the pushing of pawns, as the bishop here is hanging. And here, Vassily plays knight to e3, defends the bishop, attacks the rook, and now is ready to push his pawns to victory. There is only one move Alireza can play here in order to actually win the game. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find this maneuver while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to spot this one, congratulations. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to e5. Now, of course, that you see it now, it's very, very simple. You are just attacking the defender of the bishop on d5, and then you will start collecting pawns. So it's a simple idea, but you know, when you're playing a blitz, you might miss it. But Alireza, of course, spots it. And now the problem is, the real problem is, if you defend the knight, king to f2, which of course you guys have calculated, then rook b to e8 attacks the knight, and now Vassily would have no moves here. There's just no move you can make. Knight is hanging. If you move the knight, the bishop is hanging, and of course, if you do nothing, let's say bishop to c6 attacks the rook, then rook f8 check. And once the king moves, then just rook captures on c5, and of course the pawn will never promote as it lands on the dark square. You have a light square bishop, so this is completely winning for Alireza. So instead, after rook to e5, Vassily said, all right, you can have your knight, pawn to c6. And okay, rook captures on e3. Alireza accepts the challenge, pawn to c7. We have rook e to e8, and now, sorry, rook e to e8. This is the the idea, because if now you capture the rook here, let's say it promotes to a queen, rook captures here in b7, you will never promote this pawn. It promotes on a dark square, and of course there's no point in playing this. So after rook e to e8, we have pawn to b7, first advancing the pawn all the way. Now we're getting ready to capture the rook, but now Alireza just played rook b to c8, another brilliant move, and of course it was in this position on move 47 that Vassily Ivanchuk resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So it seems like, when you have two pawns on the 7th, you are used to your opponent resigning the game, but here you can see nicely that even with the bishop, the two rooks are able to stop the two pawns, because now what are you gonna do? Of course, if you promote this pawn, it doesn't matter. We just captures, bring another queen, rook captures, and the endgame is completely winning for Alireza. And if you don't do this, what else can you do? You can capture the rook, but still just rook captures, and this is now gonna fall. It's on a dark square. Of course, you cannot defend it. Very nicely done by both of them. Vassal playing in absolute great style, sacrificing both of those rooks, but maybe it was a tiny bit too much, and Alireza was able to take this one with some brilliant defensive maneuvers, and then just finding unique moves to take the full point, and thus winning the match. Of course, if you guys are interested in the other games, I will put all of the games. There's a study on leeches with all of the 11 games, so it will be the first link you see in the description below if you guys want to check that out. I thought this would be a nice introduction into the Julius Baer Generation Cup. So we'll see some interesting games to be played there. Erigaisi is playing Magnus in the first round, I believe. So should be very, very interesting if Magnus shows up. I mean, no one has seen Magnus since that whole fiasco in the Singfield Cup. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Should be a nice event. And that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Sometimes when you sacrifice a rook, maybe don't sacrifice the other one as well, just because it's cool and looks awesome. Maybe try to win the game rather. Once again, really hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Abdul Rahman Al Suad, Kerry Elise Rodella, Lucas Teokaris, Simon Osborne, and Paul Sertanovic for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. The Meltwater Champions Chess Tour starts on Sunday. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.